Welcome, traveler time. You've entered a realm where kings rise, empires fall, and every crown carries a curse. Today, we journey through the life of one of history's most fascinating monarchs, where love, power, and destiny intertwine. It is dawn, May 19th, 1536. Mist coils around the Tower of London. A single raven perches atop a weathered battlement, watching as the condemned queen kneels on the scaffold. The crowd murmurs. Even the air seems to hold its breath. And Boleyn, once the most powerful woman in England, now waits for the sword that will sever her from both life and history. Her lips move in prayer, calm, deliberate. Yet behind her composure lies a question that history has never fully answered. Was Anne truly guilty, or was her fall the masterpiece of a political conspiracy? Her story began not in the shadow of the scaffold, but in the glittering heart of a court where love was power and ambition could crown or destroy a queen. The tragedy of Anne Boleyn's execution did not begin with a blade. It began with a whisper and was not born to rule. The daughter of Sir Thomas Boleyn, a skilled diplomat, and Lady Elizabeth Howard, she entered the Tudor world not by inheritance, but by charm, wit, and audacity. As a young woman, and served at the French court, where she learned more than manners and music. She learned power, the elegance of the French queen, the art of conversation, the politics of the gaze. These were her weapons. When she returned to England, she was no naive lady-in-waiting. She was a strategist, polished and poised, ready to outshine every rival. And then came Henry. Henry VIII, already married to Catherine of Aragon, had ruled for nearly 2 decades. He was powerful, impulsive, and hungry, not just for heirs, but for immortality. When he first saw Anne Boleyn, she refused him. That refusal lit a fire that would burn kingdoms, and was unlike any woman Henry had ever known. She demanded not affection, but elevation. She would not be his mistress. She would be his queen. What began as flirtation became obsession. Henry's letters, filled with longing and desperation, spoke of a man who believed himself chosen by God to possess her. But the church forbade his divorce, and so Henry defied the church itself. To win, and Henry severed England from Rome. He made himself head of the Church of England, defied the Pope, and set fire to the old faith. It was an act that changed the course of Western history, and it all began with Anne Boleyn. She became his queen, crowned in splendor at Westminster in 1533. Her triumph, however, carried the scent of blood. Catherine of Aragon was exiled. Her daughter Mary was declared illegitimate. The kingdom was divided between those who saw Anne as the dawn of reform, and those who saw her as the devil's instrument. In her chambers, and bore the weight of that division, she gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, a child the king had longed to be his son. Still, she smiled through Henry's disappointment, masking her fear behind her sharp wit. But the court whispered. The old nobility, the clergy, even the servants, all watched for signs of weakness. And among them was a man who understood the tides of power better than anyone, Thomas Cromwell. Cromwell had once been Anne's ally. Together, they had built the new order, confiscating church lands, reforming institutions, enriching the crown. But Anne wanted influence. Cromwell wanted control. She sought to shape policy through persuasion. He did so through precision and fear. Their rivalry began quietly, a disagreement over charity funds, a dispute about foreign alliances, but beneath the surface, it was a struggle for England's soul. Cromwell understood Henry's moods, his pride, his vanity, his paranoia, and as Anne's charm began to fade, Henry's restlessness became a weapon waiting to be used. The queen's temper was sharp. She quarreled with courtiers, mocked the king's advisors, and once, faithfully, called Henry impotent in front of witnesses. In a court built on fear, words could be lethal. Cromwell saw his opportunity. By 1536, the court had turned cold and suffered a miscarriage, said to have been a boy. It was her 3rd pregnancy and Henry's last hope for a male heir. The king's silence afterward was chilling. He no longer visited her chambers. Whispers spread that he was courting another, Jane Seymour, quiet, obedient, and everything and was not. Cromwell began to move. In secret meetings, he spoke to men of ambition and resentment. He gathered fragments of gossip, twisted them into accusations, and forged the story that would end a queen. The charges were shocking: adultery, incest, treason. Names were named, men close to, and even her own brother, George Boleyn. There was no proof, but there was purpose. For Henry, it offered release. For Cromwell, it offered power. And for the court, it offered silence. For who would speak against the king's justice? When Anne was arrested, she did not plead. She demanded the charges be read aloud, her defiance as sharp as ever. Yet beneath that defiance was disbelief that a king who had rewritten the laws of heaven for her would now destroy her with them. The machinery of her destruction was swift. Within days, the accused men were tried and condemned. The evidence was laughable, the outcome predetermined. Anne's own trial was held in the Tower, before peers who dared not look her in the eye. Witnesses described her standing tall, her black gown shimmering in the dim light. She spoke with calm precision, denying every charge. Her eloquence moved even her enemies. But Cromwell's machine was relentless. The verdict, guilty on all counts. The sentence, death by beheading. Henry signed the order without hesitation. A foreign executioner was summoned from Calais, chosen for his skill, not his mercy. And so, the stage was set for Anne Boleyn's execution, the most infamous in English history. May 19th dawned pale and still, and walked from her chambers to the scaffold with poise that stunned those who watched. She wore a gray gown trimmed with ermine, her hair bound beneath a linen coif. She smiled, faintly, as she knelt upon the straw. Before her stood the French swordsman, waiting for his signal. She spoke briefly. She would not accuse the king, she said, for he was a gentle and sovereign lord. It was not loyalty. It was dignity, the last armor left to her. The sword flashed. A single stroke. Silence. And just like that, the woman who had divided a kingdom was gone. Cromwell's triumph was complete. The queen's crest was removed, her emblems destroyed, her memory buried beneath official proclamations. Henry married Jane Seymour within days. The court celebrated. But even victory carries a cost. In private, Henry grew haunted. He forbade anyone to speak Anne's name, yet ordered her portraits destroyed, an act of erasure that revealed obsession, not closure. Cromwell, now at the height of his power, continued to build the Reformation, confiscating monasteries, reshaping England in the image of royal supremacy. But those who rise by the sword of ambition rarely die in peace. Within 4 years, the same king who had trusted him would turn against him. Cromwell's own downfall would mirror Anne's. False charges, swift trial, cold execution. The machinery he had perfected consumed its own master. And what of Anne? Her daughter, Elizabeth, would grow to become one of the greatest monarchs in history, the Virgin Queen who forged England's golden age. Anne's blood, spilled on the scaffold, ran in the veins of a queen who would rule without a king. Centuries later, historians still debate her guilt and innocence. Was she a schemer who overreached, or a visionary who defied the limits of her time? The truth, perhaps, lies somewhere in between, in the tension between power and survival, ambition and fate. For in Tudor England, to stand too close to the throne was to stand in the shadow of the axe. The echoes of Anne Boleyn's execution still haunt the Tower of London. Some say her ghost walks the corridors on the anniversary of her death, carrying her head beneath her arm, gliding past the guards who dare not meet her gaze. But history's true haunting lies not in ghosts. It lies in the silence that followed her death. The silence of a court that watched injustice unfold and whispered only prayers of self-preservation. The silence of a king who destroyed the woman who made him powerful. The silence of a people who forgot that love and ambition are often the same coin, and both demand payment in blood. And so, her story endures, not as a tale of romance, but as a lesson written in iron and shadow. Anne Boleyn's fatal ambition reshaped a nation, split a faith, and birthed an empire. She may have fallen, but her name carved its way through time, surviving where even kings have turned to dust. Centuries later, the echoes of Anne Boleyn's execution still haunt the ruins of history. If stories like this fascinate you, don't forget to like and subscribe. More untold tales of history await you.